We've been looking at the win total for NC State football and scratching our head, but what about all the other schools in the ACC?
You are Locked On Wolfpack, your daily podcast on the NC State Wolfpack, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, Wolfpack Nation? It's time to get locked in with Locked On. Thanks for making Locked On Wolfpack your first listen each and every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcast and on YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Happy Friday to all. As always, I'm Grayson Boone, joined by former Wolfpack defensive tackle Kenton Gibbs. We've talked a lot about NC State being disrespected in the media, overlooked already, not taking into account the season that we are geared to be having here in 2024. But what about all the other teams in the ACC? Because they too have expectations. They too have doubters. And they too, some of them at least, have aspirations to get to Charlotte and take home an ACC championship. So what we're going to do today, there was a graphic posted by Jesse Simonton of On3 where he broke down all of the ACC football teams into three different categories using their win totals. There's too high, just right, or too low. So here's the graphic. And for those listening to us, I'll go ahead and read all of this out for you. So at the top, you have the too high category, the schools that their win total seems to be too high for what they may or may not accomplish. In there, you have Boston College, 4.5, Georgia Tech, 5.5, Pittsburgh, 5.5, and Virginia, 4.5. In the just right category, you have newcomer Cal, 6.5, Clemson, 9.5, Duke, 6.5, Louisville, 8.5, Miami, 9.5, Dirty Foot Club, 7.5, SMU, newcomer, 7.5, Stanford, newcomer, 3.5, Syracuse, 7.5, Virginia Tech, 8.5, and Wake Forest, 4.5. And then at the bottom of your screen, you see too low, and there sits just two teams, potentially an early look at the ACC Championship. If both of these teams make it that far, you have Florida State at 9.5 and your NC State Wolfpack at 8.5. Kenton, where would you like to start?
I'm going to start with the Wolfpack, of course, because this is, after all, Locked On Wolfpack instead of Locked On ACC. And I'll tell you this much. 8.5 being too low is very accurate there.
Yes. That
That is very accurate to me because you and I have both discussed this. If this team finishes this season 8-4, or I'm sorry, if they finish 9-4 or 8-5, we'd be looking at that team saying, what went wrong?
Right.
What happened that this team could only get 8 to 9 wins? And so that being too low is absolutely the right choice there because, again, this is not just – college is different from the NFL in that you don't have to leverage your future to go for right now, but there was a very intentional effort to build for this year, to have everything go right for this year. So if things don't work out, then there's absolutely some answering to do because I think 8.5 is criminally low for this team.
At some point during this summer, we're going to give our official record prediction for NC State moving down through the schedule. But on the surface level here, 8.5 does feel too low. The team that we've assembled, the aspirations that we have, and more importantly, the schedule that we have, 8.5 is low. Because if we have 8 wins, it's a failure. And I would even go as far to say if we finish with 9 wins, it would also be a failure. We all know that 10 wins has narrowly escaped us for years and years and years. The only time we did it was back when Phillip Rivers was still here. We're long overdue to hit that 10-win mark. I know that Coach Dorn wants it. I know that everyone within this program wants it. And right now it feels like we have the team to do it. Our schedule here, we have 7 home games. I don't see a world where we lose a single one of them. Completely honest with you. It is so soft that you should go 7-0 at home. If you do rattle off those 7 home wins, you only have to find 2 more out of the next 5 games in there somewhere. That is so attainable. So I think 8.5 is too low for the Wolfpack. Another team that really stood out to me is Georgia Tech at 5.5 being in the too high category. I think Georgia Tech's being disrespected, and that has relevance to NC State because we play them late in the season. So if they do find a lot more success than people are expecting them to, that has the potential look of maybe a trap game for NC State. We play them on the road. We're down in Atlanta. If I'm not mistaken, I think that's like a Thursday or Friday night game. So perhaps that does spell danger for the Wolfpack. I think Georgia Tech will be better than 5.5.
As much as I want to believe in Georgia Tech to be better than 5.5, I'm going to say some team names and you tell me how you feel about Georgia Tech against this team. Florida State.
Loss.
Georgia State.
They should beat Georgia State.
In the battle for Atlanta, I believe that Georgia Tech will prevail there. Syracuse.
I'll say toss-up, but I lean Yellow Jackets there.
Okay. And VMI, you could just go ahead and book that one to them. So you're at 3 wins, right?
Right.
The schedule is brutal from here. Louisville.
Probably a loss.
Duke.
Win.
Dirty Foot Club.
Well, they've been giving them some trouble, haven't they? I'll
Right.
say win.
Right.
I'll say
Okay.
win.
And now here's where the brutal gets crazy. Notre Dame.
Loss.
Virginia Tech.
Probably a loss.
Miami.
Loss.
State.
It better be a loss.
Their final game of the season is called Clean Old Fashioned Hate against their in-state rivals from the SEC. You know who that is?
Sorry about it, Tech. I think the Bulldogs got you there.
So do you know how many games you just predicted them to win?
Is that 5?
5.
All right. Maybe you proved me wrong.
Technically speaking. And the thing is, if this Georgia Tech team, if you give them Virginia Tech schedule, I'm like, oh, man, you're absolutely right. This is too low. They got one of the hardest schedules in all of the Power 5 that I'm looking at in terms of that second half of the season. That's tough. As much as I like Coach Key and what he's building in Atlanta, I'm really looking at Georgia Tech like, man, y'all just got a tough draw this year.
2 more teams I want to discuss are Miami and Syracuse. Miami is sitting in the just right category with 9.5. My instinct would tell you that feels high for Miami, but they're another school that has a very soft schedule this year. With all the talent that they pulled in through the transfer portal, 9.5 probably does feel about right for them, even though I am reluctant to agree because Mario Cristobal is going to have to find a way to get over the hump down in Coral Gables. I think Miami just has a history of having these aspirations and seemingly always falling short. So if I were a Miami fan, I'd feel a little bit nervous about that 9.5, but just looking at their schedule, I think that that's probably about accurate. Syracuse is another interesting one. I think 7.5 is probably too high for the Orange. I think they'll finish somewhere maybe like 5 or 6 wins. I don't know if they're going to be able to put it all together to hit 7 or maybe even 8 wins here in 24.
I think that Syracuse is a beneficiary of a very soft schedule, and that's why I think that is – they should be in that zone. I don't like 7.5, though. I do think 6.5 is more appropriate. As much as I like Syracuse, as much as I like Coach Fran Brown and what he's done, I think offensively, I think they're going to be a lot worse than people are realizing, and that's just the honest to God truth in my opinion.
So if there are any on this list that you find interesting, maybe too high, too low, or just right, make sure to get them down in the comments. We'll be sure to read each and every one of those. Tell us your thoughts, whether or not you think NC State is on the money at 8.5, they're being disrespected at 8.5, or if this is the year that they're going to hit that 10-win mark. Coming up next, we're getting into Super Regionals this weekend down in Athens, Georgia, and why the Wolfpack will move on to Omaha after a quick word from our sponsors. Today's sponsor is eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience, that's the formula for winning championships. But it's also the formula for keeping your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. From superchargers to roof racks, exhaust kits, and LED headlights, whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay's Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. That's because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber and not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. Middle portion of our Friday show. Now we're talking Super Regionals. NC State baseball down in Georgia this weekend for the Athens Super Regional. We drew the later weekend draw, so we have our games on Saturday, Sunday, and then Monday, if necessary. All of our games are at noon. Now, I actually prefer a noon baseball game to a noon football game. Very much of a different atmosphere. So we instantly go back to have memories about 2021 out in Arkansas. That was the last time the NC State was in a super regional, and we all know how that ended. We upset the number one team in the country and made it out to Omaha. Now, Georgia is not the number one team in the country. They're the number 7 team in the country, but they have one of the most prolific offenses in the country. This week, you've already heard me say the name Charlie Condon. He is the best player in the country in college baseball. He's hitting .445, 36 home runs, 77 RBIs, and very surely to go probably in the top 3 of this year's MLB draft. Probably number 1, if we're being completely honest here. So they have one of the best offenses in the country. They hit a lot of home runs. They get a lot of people on base, and they make you pay for mistakes. The recipe for success for the Pac-9 this weekend, it's going to be in the starting pitching. Now, of course, we're going to have to score runs of our own, but as I already mentioned, these games really feel like they will be won or lost in the first 4 to 5 innings. I think it is going to be very much on the shoulders of Sam Highfill, Dom Fritton, possibly Logan Whitaker. Our starting pitchers have to submit their best performances that they have all season long, because I do believe if you can keep Georgia in the ballpark at a relatively decent clip, I'm saying maybe a solo home run here and there won't kill you, but it's going to get real dicey real quick. If you can bridge a close ball game, or maybe even one that you have the lead in, over to Jacob Duden, Derek Smith, Cooper Consiglio, and the rest of the bullpen, I feel really good about NC State's chances down in Athens.
Yeah, for sure. And you talk about the idea of, hey, you've got to keep it close. You've got to keep it close. You've got to keep it close because bullpen can get it done. I think it's more so on the offense. I think it's more so on Mack. I think it's on Pennington. I think it's on Sosa. I think it's on all those guys. Our biggest bats can't be a big bust in Athens. If that's the case, if the heart of the lineup struggles, then we're going to struggle mightily. And I know that some people would hear that and say, well, it's going to take a team effort. It's going to take everybody, because that's what you look at when you're playing Georgia, because they're coming as a team. They're not coming as a heart of the lineup. But I'll tell you this, generally speaking, even if the rest of the guys just play good defense and are serviceable at bat, or maybe even a little below average at bat, if the heart of the lineup does what they're supposed to do, Mack, Pennington, Sosa, and company do what they're supposed to do, I am willing to bet my bottom dollar there's not a world where they get this offense jumping and we still don't find success here. I really find that a hard situation to believe.
Weekends are not exactly linear, especially not in college baseball, but
Right.
I find a little bit of solace in the fact that Georgia struggled last weekend with Army. They struggled last weekend with Georgia Tech. Those are not very dominant teams on the offensive end of things. We all know that entering this tournament, we held one of the most impressive resumes in the entire country. Series wins against Clemson, who is a national host. UNC, national host. Split with Florida State, they're a national host. You sweep Wake Forest. You beat Duke in a series. I mean, we've had some of the top competition in the country in the ACC, and NC State has stood above many of those schools for the majority of this year. So it's a lot about everything that got you here has to be what takes you through. That's serviceable starting pitching that can give you a chance in these late ball games. That's your offense, like Kenton was talking about. Your guys have to be your guys. That's Cozart, Pennington, Makarevich, and everyone else stepping up. It's got to be all hands on deck for all 3 of these things. So I remember early in the season, I had the idea that it seemed that Avent was putting a lot of pressure on younger guys, these freshman guys, to get in as much experience and repetitions as they could so early in the season. A weekend like this is exactly why you do something like that. Jacob Duden, he's now basically a seasoned veteran, even though he's still a freshman. Derek Smith, a seasoned veteran, even though he's really come on strong in the last month and a half. Cooper Consiglio, just a freshman. He has been awesome coming out of the bullpen. All that early experience has built them for a moment like this. This team, despite all the injuries, all the setbacks, all the adversity, they are built for this moment. They have the offense to outslug Georgia. They have the pitching to shut it down with the back end of that bullpen. They have everything that they need to beat Georgia, and then take another trip out to Omaha. So everything that got them into the dance has to keep them dancing throughout this weekend down in Athens.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, it reminds me of that old Frank Sinatra song, "Don't forget who brought you to the dance," right?
Yes.
That's what this has to be. This has to be a team that, again, offensively, you know what you're doing. Nobody needs to do too much. Just be yourself. Be yourself offensively. The starters and the bullpen, it's been a collaborative effort. Our starters haven't thought that they need to do too much, and do not feel the need to press so hard to be so perfect that you are no longer counting on your teammates, because this team is just that, a complete team. The big names have had moments where they've gone down during times in this season, or they have not shown up and performed at times during this season, and everybody else came along the way. The bullpen that we're now talking about as dominant, early in this season, them boys couldn't get it out. That's just the truth. This team has shown up and done what they needed to do, so that when you look at how they've come together and molded and meshed, it's not about just one group. Yes, the bullpen has been dominant. There have been times where our offense carried us and our bullpen couldn't get out, and we still found a way to win ball games. Rely on each other, count on each other. Be a team. Nobody needs to do too much. Do your job to the best of your ability and let the chips fall where they may.
NC State versus Georgia this weekend in the Super Regionals down in Athens. Game 1 is at noon on Saturday. Looking forward to another great weekend of NC State baseball. We're not ready for it to end. We're ready for more magic. We want to see the boys get back to Omaha. This is their opportunity to do so. Coming up next, we're going to round out our Friday episode with Fan Friday, addressing our top comments of the week after a quick word from our sponsors. Last couple of minutes of our Friday show. Now time for Fan Friday, addressing our top comments of the week. Here we go. First one comes from Eric Hoffman. They say, the sleeping giant in Raleighwood is now awake. Wolfpack Nation is rolling. Hats off to the Chancellor's support, athletic administration, and great coaching staffs. Success breeds success. Stay hungry. Go Pack. So, yes, this is in reference to this entire calendar year that NC State Athletics has put together. Multiple Final Four runs. Football reaches a bowl game. Baseball is now in the Super Regional. And all the non-revenue sports are seemingly winning championships left and right. And we ran an episode highlighting everything that Boo Corrigan has accomplished at NC State that kind of gets overshadowed. At the time, it was because everyone wanted him to make a coaching change for Keats, which is very obviously no longer necessary. But I remember saying back then, Boo Corrigan deserves a lot more credit than what he has gotten here so far in his tenure. We're now sitting here in early June. How about now? How about everything that has occurred in these last 3 months and the meteoric rise that the NC State athletic brand feels like they continue to ride here? What a job by the entire athletic program. There's also some more credit that needs to go to Debbie Yao, because some of these coaches are still the ones that she hired. So she left behind some winners. They're continuing to win now, but NC State is collecting all of the benefit, and it only keeps going up from here.
Yeah, and you talk about what Boo Corrigan has done, and it absolutely needs to be acknowledged. But there is something else that needs to be acknowledged as well. In terms of Debbie Yao was thought of as this hothead that did not have a certain amount of respect nationally because she was so hot-headed, brash, all those good things. But look at some of the decisions that she made in terms of coaches she's kept that have worked out, right? How many times were people like, all right, that's enough. Avon needs to go. It's time. It's time. And now look. How many folks, and let's be honest, let's not play around. Let's keep it a whole stack now. How many folks are ready for Doran to go? How many? How many said, all right, this is a failed experiment. It's time. And now all of a sudden, we are gearing up for a season which the expectations are higher than they've ever been in Raleigh. So, there's not really too much to kind of say there in terms of the job that he's done. You just got to go out and execute. But very seriously, Eric Hoffman is right. This starts off with Chancellor Woodson. This goes to, the AD, all the athletic administrators. We talked about Thunder ad nauseum. He's the assistant athletic director. That's how this thing works. Everybody's tied in and connected and making steps in the right direction, because success breeds success is so true. And the things that are required to win, every sport has different details that require you or that are required to win. But they all start off with the same broad strokes of an extreme amount of hard work, an extreme amount of dedication, and an extreme amount of belief that you can do it. Wolfpack Nation is back believing again. We're now prepared to be a university that's an everything school. We're a cheese wheel school. We're a football school. We're a basketball school. We're a women's basketball school. We're a baseball school. We're a damn it, line it up and we'll kick your ass school. That's who we are.
Next one comes from Shanerman29. They say, I think NC State football is going to surprise everyone. I've watched multiple podcasts that are already ruling Tennessee over NC State an easy win and have them looking past that game. They forget Joe Lee alone gave them a fit last season without a team around him. Yep, they're sleeping on Raleighwood. So Shanerman, I not only agree for Tennessee, I also agree for Clemson. We talked a lot about NC State flying under the radar, not receiving the national respect that we believe that they deserve. We're saying all of that because we all know that to be true, but at the same time, that's fine. The rest of the nation, they don't really need to know what we have under the hood yet, because once we lift up the curtain and we show everybody what we got in late August, early September, it's going to be go time. In Tennessee, they are already looking past NC State. I can promise you that. They don't think NC State is for real. They don't think we're serious this year. Clemson, more of the same, especially because we have to go down there to Clemson, and for some reason, we cannot buy a win down there. This is the year to rewrite all of these wrongs. This is the year to grab the national attention, say, look, it's our time now. This is us. We are here. This is the team. Watch us do it. Much of the country, they don't think we're for real. They don't think we can get to Charlotte. They don't think we can get to the CFP. It is up to Dave Dorn and this team in this season to prove everyone wrong.
You know, there are many, many things that I want to say about this Tennessee team that I think there is so much that we are not properly assigning or attributing some importance to in terms of, oh, this is going to be an easy game for NC State. This is going to be an easy game for Tennessee. I really and truly don't. With all due respect, I talk about building a fence around the state of North Carolina all the time because James Pierce Jr., who is likely Tennessee's best player, edge rusher, 6'5", 240. He's a lot like Brian Burns. I would say a little less powerful, a little more twitchy, a little less bendy. I will say this. For all the things that he is, there's a large reason why I keep saying Jordan Waters is going to have to be good this year. That running back stable is going to have to be good this year because I like Belton. I like our tackles. I like them. I don't think that they'll succeed in a situation where they're stuck kicking back, hitting vertical sets 25, 30 times a game. I don't. But with that being said, Tennessee is losing a lot in terms of that defensive line, a lot in terms of that defense in general. And everybody is just like, oh, yeah, they got all these young guys they'll be ready. Game 2. You sure about that? You sure that they're going to be? I'm going to tell you this much. I enjoy the thought that NC State cannot keep up and they can't compete and all those good things. Good. I enjoy it. I enjoy it because that narrative that is prevailing, it also has to then exist that this is a massive upset if NC State wins. It can't be both an easy win for Tennessee and a game that NC State is supposed to win.
Right.
Those two thoughts cannot exist in the same space. I think Nico is the real deal. I think that he is a potential Davey O'Brien winner, potential Heisman guy in the future. I really do. I think that he's that good. I'm excited to see what his second game as a starter with this crew looks like and how they compete with NC State. I'm excited for it.
Next one comes from Keiko Torres, 3,700. They say, is this the season when Dorn finally keeps the pedal to the metal offensively? Too many times in recent seasons, he lets up once we get a 2-touchdown lead, and inevitably we end up in a tight game we shouldn't have been in. With this offensive talent and a creative OC, I'd love for us to pile on the scoring all game long. This one is particularly interesting for this season in 2024. With the CFP now expanding out to 12 teams, and NC State is very much in the mix to be reaching one of these 12 teams, Style points are more than likely going to matter for NC State in this season. So what does that mean? Well, Coach Dorn has had the reputation for being a bit conservative on the offensive end once NC State gets what you would call a considerable lead. I can think of a couple times last year. I know Virginia Tech, we had them dead in the water. Then all of a sudden they creep all the way back in and we end up winning that game by just 7 points. The Marshall game, at times, I thought we played with our food. I instantly go back to that Boston College loss at home 2 seasons ago. Should have had that one in the bag, let that one slip away. So at times, that mindset has bitten us in the behind. This year in particular, with all the new offensive talent we brought in and where we're trying to get at the end of the season, I think it does have to be pedal to the metal all year long. I think you do have to strive after offensive numbers that you're really not accustomed to getting after. I think there needs to be several games where you get into the 40s, maybe even the 50s up on the scoreboard, because you have to leave no doubt. When it comes to the CFP committee at the end of the season, if you're not in Charlotte or winning in Charlotte, then you are strictly at the discretion of a committee. And so that means you better have all the style points you could have possibly accumulated. It needs to be pedal to the metal. Let Robert and I cook. We said that all season last year, and by the end of the season, that man was cooking for sure. It needs to start from the jump this year. Let that man cook, let the offense flow freely, and let the touchdowns be scored.
Yeah, you talk about the Virginia Tech game. You talk about the Boston College game. How many times do we have to teach you this lesson, old man? Fire away and keep firing away. Again, this is a new era of college football where the game is more geared towards offense than ever. If you are not using your offense to its max potential, I can guarantee you your opponent is. Yeah. They are trying to score as much as they can, as fast as they can, especially if they're down. So, yes, I get it. Milk clock, all that good stuff. Don't care. Run your offense, whatever that looks like. Don't all of a sudden get a lead, go into your shell. Oh, we must run the ball on first down. If that's not who you've been all game, don't start it up now.
Last one comes from Derek Jackson, 1233. They say the fact that KC did what he did last year with average quarterback play and everyone on the field knowing he was getting the ball, this year will be something special. If we can get above average quarterback play and at least one other wide receiver steps up to be consistent, his stats jump significantly. So, yes, extending off our conversation that we had on Wednesday, KC really did have an insane season once you include all of the circumstances. Early in the season, Brennan Armstrong struggled mightily. Plenty of those games early in the season, it felt like it was a chore to try and throw a pass. Then you have MJ Morris inserted into the lineup. Little bit of offensive spark there. He did get things going. Then he sits back down. So you got to put Armstrong back in. Now, he did have a much better second half of the season, but the main point here, KC was the only consistent receiver on the entire team. So other teams, when they're game planning for NC State, they know KC Concepcion is more than likely going to be force-fed the ball. And then we went on the field, force-fed him the ball, and the man still had 10 touchdowns, just short of 1,000 yards receiving, and was a freshman All-American. Doing all of that with all of those circumstances is nothing short of absolutely insane. And so, yes, I wholeheartedly agree. If Grayson McCall steps up and be the quarterback that we're hoping that he can be, and the rest of these offensive skill players can provide some pop of their own, KC should be an even bigger weapon than he was last year. And if he is that, he makes everyone else around him better as well. So if everything clicks, it could be a very special season for KC in 2024.
I will take it a step further. KC was not only our only consistent receiving weapon and threat last year, he was the only consistent threat last year, period. You're talking about the leading receiver, second leading rusher on the team, behind Brennan Armstrong as number one. I'm sorry to say this, and this is no disrespect to the other players that were on the roster, that objectively, he was it. Point blank, period. In the words of Kenny Loggins, you were waiting on a sign, your miracle. This was it. He was all there was. So with that being said, having other guys come in, having other guys take that pressure off of him, you will see a better version of him, because by the end of the season, you could see his body physically wearing down. You could see it. There were multiple games where he looked hobbled towards the end of the season. And you're like, oh, man, like, I get it. We want to win this game, but how much do we want to leverage his future against that? We have more players now. There is no world. There is not a world where I believe KC is our second leading rusher this next year. There isn't one. There isn't one. There isn't a world where I believe a quarterback is our leading rusher this year. There isn't one because we've made significant upgrades at every single skill position.
Yeah.
So with that being said, all of those pressure release valves for a guy as specialist KC, I'm telling you what, there are going to be some defensive backs looking at the back of number 10. They're going to be looking at the back of his head like they're a good barber. You understand? They're trying to fix him up with the taper right below the occipital bone, if you get what I'm saying, okay? So this is the reality that we're looking at, where if we have more weapons around him, there is no doubt in my mind he does something extremely special that's rarely been seen this year.
I think that's very well said, considering Casey actually cuts his own hair. That's a fact. That'll do it for us here on Friday. As always, thank you all so much for joining us. Be sure to hit that like button. Drop your comments in the comment box. Tell us what you thought about the rest of the ACC win totals across the league. Maybe who's high, who's low, or who belongs right there in the just right category. NC State baseball is down in Athens for the Super Regional. Tell us what you think needs to happen for NC State to take out the Bulldogs and advance to Omaha. Anything else you have on your mind, drop it down in the comment box, and we will see you next week. Now, next week, as requested, we will be Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. So be on the lookout for us on those 3 days in particular. Enjoy your weekend. Go NC State baseball. See you all on Monday. And until then, go Pack.
Go Pack.